thank everybody for joining us. Just make sure that you're on mute. You can actually see some familiar faces actually. Okay, so we're going to get rolling here. So, my name is Jeff Waldman. I am going to be moderating this fireside chat style webinar. Just want to welcome everyone to this webinar. It's a fantastic topic. So I'm the founder of Scale HR. So we work with HR tech companies on lots of different things. And then, so today we have a fantastic topic. It's beyond the resume, making skill-based hiring work. I just want to ask a question, just a thumbs up or thumbs down if you can hear me okay. Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs up, or just put it in the camera. Excellent. Okay, good. Perfect. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So once again, I'm from Scale HR. This webinar is being supported by Canditech, which is a fantastic software, and we'll get more into it, as we go along. But for those of you who do skills-based hiring, skills-based anything, and then use, actual assessments to actually assess talent, you should check them out. So canditech.io, and you will get all of the information after this webinar is finished. All right. So I'm moderating. The stars of the show today are Ellie, Angell, and Jonathan Braunstein. Ellie is with Canditech, phenomenal person, expert in all things when it comes to job assessment, talent assessment, and so forth. And so Ellie will be here. And also Jonathan's, so hi Ellie. John, Montreal-based, he is a former head of HR. Also now he does a lot of advisory and coaching work, and he is an expert in all things skills-based org. So the two of them are going to be a dynamic power duo, and I'm really looking forward to sort of hearing what they have to say. All right, let's get into some housekeeping. So we are going to be having the recording. We'll share it out tomorrow. And also, of course, as I mentioned earlier, for those that were in earlier, there's about 42 different AI-powered note takers that are capturing this webinar today. Creating like an action list, for everybody. There's also the chat feature, so please share in the chat. Where you're calling them from, and then if you have questions, there is a Q&A feature. So please put your questions in there. You will get a copy of the slides, so don't worry. So I know some people like to take photos of the webinars as they're going. You can, don't have to. And then obviously tomorrow we'll be sending out a bit of a recap on the webinar, video, content, action items, links, and so on. So this is a little bit different. This isn't your typical webinar that are one-sided. It's a bit of a fireside chat structure, and so that'll be done with Ellie and John. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. The agenda: we're going to get into a bit of a introduction on skills-based org, and then we're going to talk a bit about the business case for it. I know some people are doing it, some aren't, some don't understand it, some are on the fence. So we're going to clarify all of that for you. And then we're also going to talk about skill-based org design and the workforce planning. And then we'll get into hiring, technology, obviously that's a part of it. And then we'll get into a Q&A. So hopefully we'll get through all of this in, the hour. And so, yeah, so that's our topic. So we're going to get right into sort of like an introduction. I'm just going to show just, a couple of slides. The first one is, I think a lot of this is not, earth-shattering, but this has been something that we've been talking about, for a number of years now. But according to SHRM, which is based in the US, they do a lot of research. So about over half of managers, recruiters, HR practitioners have actually relaxed their requirement on education. So, it's an interesting thing. And so that lends itself more to the skill-based movement. You obviously have a degree in something or do what have you, doesn't mean that you're actually more qualified for a job. This is trending upward, definitely, which is really interesting. And there's other research done by, LinkedIn obviously is a great place for research. So 92% of hiring managers, believe soft skills are actually, more important than hard skills. This has been a general trend over the, number of years. I didn't realize, that high, but it's pretty high. I think the third stat, which is interesting, is 89% of bot hires, typically lack the critical soft skill. Obviously, soft skills is hard to assess from a resume, online profile, interview. Yeah, you can probably get away with that, but this is a really interesting stat, and it just goes more towards the business case for skills-based orgs. And then I think assessment. I think most people here, just by a show of hands, thumb up, thumb down, if you use some kind of assessment, based hiring assessment. So this could be using a tool like a Canditech. It could be doing something else, right? Obviously, it's becoming more and more, and I think creep up toward 95 next year. I think the trend is towards this movement of skills-based org, and so I just wanted to just sort of share that. And if you have any thoughts, put them in the chat, please. And so here we go. I'm going to get started with a question, and we're going to talk about the business case, and it's just going to be question, and we're going to let both John and Ellie duke it out and answer these questions. So, what is a skills-based org, and why have we seen this shift? I'm going to pose it to both of you, so go for it.
I didn't know that Ellie and I are supposed to be duking it out, so I didn't really bring gloves or headgear, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to get, my behind kicked. So can it be more of a conversation than a duking out?
Yeah, that's right. I didn't mean it. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean it to be like a violent.
It's all good.
Situation. You can just talk about it. Go ahead.
Okay, we'll talk about it. So first, Jeff, thanks for inviting us onto this. Skills-based organizations are something that I've been really enamored with since the beginning of my career, not really knowing what it was. And it's really taken a lot of steam in the last 5 years. So first, I just want to demystify for a moment what we mean by skills-based organizations. The reality is most of our organizations today have implemented some kind of skills-based practice. So if you have job rotations, job shadowing, if you get seconded to another function for a year, those are skills-based practices. If you're doing strategic workforce planning, and if you have a team who's looking at the skills that you need every year, so that's a skills-based practice as well. If you're on an agile team and doing software development, you've probably heard of T-skilling, where you expand your wings in terms of skills, not just your expertise. That's also a skills-based practice. So the main difference between that and a skills-based organization is skills-based organizations are really focused on scale when it comes to those practices, and they focus on deploying employees based on their specific skills rather than rigid job titles. So today we have a job, and if you exit that box of your job, some people might be okay with it, some won't. Whereas in a skills-based organization, the way that we reward, the way that we manage, the way that we performance manage, and the way that we build our teams are done in very fluid ways, where we can very easily move people with the right skills and the right interest and passion to the business outcome that they can have the biggest impact on. So that, in a nutshell, is a definition of a skills-based organization. And I would say we see this shift today for a few reasons. The first, AI has made life way easier at mapping and tracking skills. If we have anybody on this call that's ever done a skills and knowledge matrix, it's fun. You do it. You get people really excited about it. It lives for about a week, and then a month later, you're cursing because it's no longer up to date. And 3 months later, people don't even want to hear those words anymore. And so, when it comes to AI, it's really made the tracking and understanding of people's skills a lot more seamless. And so that has ushered in this era. And the last thing I'll say on this is we live in greater disruptive times, and the more disruption there is, the faster an organization needs to pivot. And what we know academically and from experience is that organizations that have a good pulse on the skills can pivot a lot faster than organizations that have a lot of blind spots. And, before maybe I pass it on to Ellie, some of the big cues that you see in the environment that this is happening is when you see the big fours, McKinsey, Deloitte, Korn Ferry, PwC, when they're moving in the direction of offering solutions on skills-based organizations, that's a big indicator that this is happening, and it's happening now, as well as all the tech companies that have emerged in the last 5 years to facilitate this. There's a screaming need for it today.
Well, hello, everyone. And again, Jeff, thank you so much for having us on. This is really, really exciting. And Jonathan, if we were going to duke it out, just remember, I'm a Scottish lady, so don't underestimate the power of butts. So just to follow what you said something very interesting about tech companies. So I could say that from my experience, I have a background in HR recruitment, but for the last 6 years, I've been working in HR tech in startups. And as with, when I thought I was joining my first role in a startup 6 years ago, I thought I was coming in to be a business development manager. But within 3 months, I was then moving to SDR. I was doing sales. I didn't know what a demo was when I first started. And then very quickly, I was joining conferences. I was doing webinars. And then, of course, getting involved with marketing, even sometimes getting involved with security documents. So I think that it's very interesting because startups, they might not believe that they're in a skills-based hiring environment, but you have to wear many hats and you have to be doing lots of things. And wherever you have a skill or something to offer and bring to the table, it's being utilized in a startup. And actually, I can tell you it's something that I've loved. Like, I've loved the opportunity. If I joined a company that was much bigger, I could, like you said, maybe put in my box that maybe I'd have a little bit of fluctuation, but for the most part, this was my role, these are my duties, and that's it. And working in startups, it's given me the opportunity to explore lots of things that I didn't even think I could do or didn't think that I loved. And I think this is also something that I think employees can get a lot of satisfaction as well. They are able to try out things and things that they really love doing that they wouldn't have had the opportunity otherwise to be able to get involved in. And it's actually something we hear a lot when we're interviewing, for example, candidates join the company and they say, I really want to get involved with lots of things. I want to grow. I want to get my hands into many pies, as they say. And so I think from an employee perspective or employee satisfaction perspective, it's a really good thing to offer them the opportunity to showcase and utilize the skills that they have and see where it can take them, see where it can add value to the businesses that they're going to be joining.
Yeah, and I think you really illustrated really well what T-skilling actually looks like in your life at the beginning part of your response there. You came in with a certain job, and then before you knew it, you're wearing all these different hats, learning all these different skills. And what we know is that organizations with what we call redundancy of skill, which is what you were doing, can actually pivot a lot faster depending on what's being thrown at them. Just to go global for a moment, not so recent, but recent enough, World Economic Forum had a future of job report that showed that 60% of workers will require training before 2027. And 44% of their skills will be disrupted in the next 5 years. So whenever we think about skills-based organizations, those that really put a focus on helping people skill, reskill, pivot, are going to have an edge over the others.
So fantastic. So thanks for that. Let's just sort of carry on. Those are excellent comments. And so obviously the next sort of logical question is, can you share data that actually shows that this move is working? And obviously it's one thing just to talk about it, say it, but can you shed light on that?
Absolutely. So I will kick this one off. So when it comes to sharing data in terms of the hiring process, this is something we really see companies benefiting pretty much from day one. I think that in terms of switching from having a very CV, and of course we'll get more into this, having a very CV first and then everything else after, or resume first, everything else after. We see companies are able, when they make some adjustments and put skills at the focus, they're able to, first of all, dramatically reduce their time to hire because they're focusing on validating the skills very, very early on. But also later on, they're seeing a huge reduction of interview hours because they are, again, ensuring that the candidates have all the right skills before they're bringing them into the hiring interviews. And so these interviews where you're getting to question, 7 or 8 and saying, hey, do you have experience at this? You're breaking that down and putting that to light, shedding light on that a little bit earlier on in the process. So massive reduction in interview hours. Also, reduction in reducing the chances of mishiring, of course, again, because you're investigating all the skills early on, all the skills that are most relevant. And look, it's been known since the 90s that job simulations were known to be a work sample test, are known to be the highest predictor for future job performance. It's the most valid way to evaluate candidates, and it really forces hiring managers to actually critique the skills that are most relevant to the role rather than any other factor. We work with a very, very large gaming company that up until 3 years ago, when they started working with Canditech, you wanted to be a data analyst at this said company, you had to have 3 years minimum experience of SQL, and there was no questions asked, and that was it. Then, of course, they started working with Canditech, and they said, you know what, you think you've got what it takes to be a data analyst? Here is a short challenge, 50-minute challenge. And what they saw was that candidates were passing and far exceeding the SQL skills than those that had typically been at a university and got a great degree from the top universities. Those that had maybe self-taught SQL, or, you know, when COVID, a lot of people went online, they learned new skills, they upskilled themselves. They were actually now much more efficient at data analysis, SQL, than those that had gone to the top universities. And so they were able to not only diversify the pool of candidates, but really flip things on and give more candidates a chance to showcase like why they deserve the role within that company.
Yeah, you know, IBM has, you know, for the large part of their history, really led the way on forward-thinking practices. And so I like to look at them in terms of giving us cues. And they've removed, you know, degree requirements for a lot of their job descriptions because they've landed on very similar understanding that experience and on-the-ground work is sometimes going to give you way more than a degree will. Some other quick, you know, stats, because I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to these things around what works and how do we know. McKinsey, for example, has shown that companies that adopt skills-based workforce planning, skills-based practices are 3 times more likely to handle whatever economic uncertainties get thrown at them. And that's particularly important today, given everything that's going on. So companies that have been doing this for years already are probably weathering this storm better than those that have stuck to more traditional types. And Deloitte, for example, has also seen that this shift, so with skills-based organizations, are 49% more likely to maximize efficiency than organizations that have more role-dominant organizational structure. And again, really timely today, this stat, because belts are tightening. And so the more efficient you are, forget about being agile, you know, that's one case, but just the more efficient you are internally, the better you can weather the storm that we're in. So there's some very good data out there that's telling us this is something that's really worth paying attention to today, especially.
Fantastic. And so once again, everybody, question in the question section. There have been a couple of questions already, and just comments and thoughts in the chat. So my next question to you both is, what challenges do orgs face when moving to this? You know, I mean, obviously there are going to be people that are like, you know, this won't work, but let's just, you know, not worry about those guys. And let's focus on, you know, the one that actually want to do something. So what challenges are there?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest challenges when moving to this type of approach is the legacy mindset, right? The CV, the resume, it's been there from really many years. I actually, when I worked at my agency 6 years ago, we had one of our directors, she'd been working in recruitment for, I think, 35 or 40 years. And she used to tell us that they used to get the resumes and they used to, you know, sign them off, and then they used to physically mail them in the post out to their, you know, clients that they're working with. And like, of course, now we kind of do it by email or, you know, application forms or LinkedIn or whatever it is, but it's really the same process. And this idea that, you know, the CV, the resume, this is king. And this is where everything starts, right? In terms of the candidate journey is like, okay, let's start with the resume. And then from there, we can make decisions as to who is moving on to the next. Now with AI, it's funny because even this morning I was on a call with the company, and one of the questions they asked me about was CV parsing, or, you know, resume parsing. And it's really funny because nowadays you have a lot of candidates that are using AI to write their resumes, and then they're looking for AI tools to then search through those AI written resumes to see that there's enough AI words that, you know, match with their job description that was probably made by an AI. And so nowadays, what is being prioritized, or who's being prioritized? Well, candidates that know how to use AI, candidates that understand how an ATS works, candidates that understand, okay, if I use this word instead of that word, if I use solutions manager instead of sales manager, then I'm more likely to get through. And actually the actual skill itself of, are you going to be great at this role, is completely lost. This suitability or job suitability for the specific job based on the skills that are required is being completely overtaken by someone's ability to create a nice CV or create a nice resume or add a nice cover letter, or maybe they're able to grab your attention because they can write out on LinkedIn with a really nice, you know, eye-taking, you know, message. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I actually love it when candidates do that. But that being said, like, that doesn't tell you about a candidate's skills. It tells you about how they can make their skills look or sound within a written document.
I think to summarize a little bit of what I heard Ellie just say is, you have AI writing a job description, then you have AI responding to the job description, then you have AI responding to that response and seeing if it matched the job description. Interesting. I don't know what to say or do with that, and just wanted to recap that in my own words. And, you know, what we're seeing in terms of challenges, this is maybe more about AI rather than skills-based organizations, but I just feel a need to say, based on what Ellie just shared, is that there's a lot of data that the research is showing, and I can't quote it right now, I didn't come prepared with it, but where it's become quite dizzying for leaders and especially hiring managers, that are now getting overwhelmed with applications, because it's way easier for candidates to just mass, spray and pray type, apply everywhere your resume. And then, so you have managers right now that are complaining that they're inundated with resumes. They can tell about half of the time which ones are written by AI, but the sheer amount that they're getting makes it very, very difficult for them to even sift through, which is unprecedented. But now kind of going back to skills-based organizations, some of the challenges that organizations face that I've seen is they often will approach me and want to kind of boil the ocean in one shot. It's like, we're going to go rip the Band-Aid and we're going to go full-blown skills-based organization everywhere, every department. And that's probably, excitement, great. A practicality, terrible. Boiling the ocean on something that is actually quite expensive to do ends up by bringing up a lot of resistance in the organization, because moving to skills-based is expensive. It takes a little bit more work. It takes more technology. The results are better, but really the challenge is figuring out which parts of the organization you really want to focus on as a starting place to move in that direction and then kind of scale from there. I would say another key challenge is legacy ways of working and legacy mindsets. We grow up in hierarchies. We don't really know how to work outside of hierarchies. There's a lot of feeling of ownership of employees. And so there's a big culture shift that needs to happen in organizations. And the ones that have done this well are succeeding, allowing people to exit their box and to move outside of their function into other functions and to deliver work over there. That's a big shift in mindset for leaders. There's other complexities around skills and tasks, which I'll talk to later, but those are the main ones that come to my mind.
Great, thank you for that. I think those are excellent. So we're going to shift our topic now to org design, because obviously there are three parts to this. There's the org structure, there's workforce planning, and there's hiring. So we're going to just focus on this one piece first. So my next question is, how are the key principles of designing an organization around skill different than what we see today?
Yeah. So, a couple quick notes there. First is, I don't want to spend a ton of time on org design over here, but this is a part of the conversation that I think is important to give context when we talk about what it takes to even get to skills-based hiring. And the reason why structure is super important is for a reason that sounds like this. Imagine taking a human, bring them to the beach, getting them super trained to be the best swimmer that they can. They go to the gym, they're jacked up, not me, not a good example, but jacked up, great nutrition, great energy. They know how to tackle those waves. And then you put them in front of a tidal wave. Okay. Good luck. All that investment that you did in their learning and development is going to go down the drain. Why? Because that tidal wave is the equivalence to organizational structure. It always wins. The way that we structure is going to produce the behaviors that we see. And so structure for me is always a good place to start when talking about any of these themes. The key principles of org design when it comes to skills-based organizations, I would break it down to three main points. The first is the skill becomes the currency. Work is organized around capabilities rather than roles. You just ditch the roles, ditch the titles, and it's more about building really fluid, and this is the second point, really fluid, dynamic work structures where groups come together and disband based on the business outcomes to be achieved. So if we have a new business outcome that we need to do for a new opportunity in the market, we quickly get a sense of where those skills reside in the organization, bring the team together, regardless of who they report to. They work together for a month, 2 months, a year, and then they disband onto the next business outcome. So these organizational structures have to allow for a lot of fluidity. And then the third point is around continuous learning. In these organizations, you have structures that are put into place like time to learn, time for code development, time for communities of practice, so that people can really expand their skills quickly so that they can pivot to new demands as they pop up. I think I'll stop there in terms of key principles. I would like to introduce two terms, though, since we're talking about skills-based organizations. The first are skills taxonomies, and the second is task taxonomy or taskonomy. I don't know. I'm sure somebody's going to merge those words at some point. And those are, I think, are new vocabularies, new, let's say, ways of thinking that most HR professionals are going to have at the tip of their tongue within a few years and really willing to make a bet on this. A skill taxonomy essentially is a common job definition, a common definition of what the skills are to be able to deliver on work, their definition. And it is something that is meant to be shared by many people. And now where this gets confusing is every government has created their own skill taxonomy. So Canada has one for free, you can check it out. The US government has one for free, you can check it out. But every company has created one for themselves as well. And then you have tech companies that are saying, you know what, this is looking very messy. We've created a general skills taxonomy, and we really suggest everybody use this one so that we have a common vocabulary between organizations around people's skills. And now, similarly, there's a task taxonomy that's being developed as well. So forget about just skills. If you want to deliver on an outcome, these are the tasks that it takes, and this is the definition of those tasks. So there's a whole new vocabulary that is emerging that is really shaking up the way that we structure work and imagine organizations. So I know this was a bit of a run-on answer, but I just wanted to give that as context because that informs a lot of our thinking for the rest of our call.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. Thanks for that, John. Okay, so obviously people always ask, so how do we do this, right? So what are the steps to shift to this new skill-based structure?
So other than the obvious ones, which is, getting leadership on board and it has to come from the top, I'll leave all the change management obvious stuff aside. The very fast answers are linked to what I just said. Building a robust skills taxonomy aligned with your business goals. And I really recommend taking ones that exist. If you're trying to reinvent the wheel, in 5 years, your terms will be obsolete. So just go with what's already out there, make your life way easier. The second is using AI-powered platforms that are good at understanding all the skills that you have in your organization, but that are also good at understanding the skills that exist out in the market. And that technology is going to make your internal talent marketplace a lot easier to function with a lot less lift from your resources. And the third is building your strategic workforce planning muscle. Strategic workforce planning has really taken a lot more space in organizations, say in the last 8 years, but it's still early days. And what we're seeing is that organizations that are doing that well are starting to get a bit ahead of the curve in terms of being able to predict what kind of people they'll need in the future.
Ellie, do you want to weigh in or do you want me to go to the next question?
I think move to the next question.
So once again, everybody, please put your questions in the Q&A. Okay, so now we've talked about the org structure side of things. We're now going to move into workforce planning. Okay, so my first question into this session is, so how does workforce planning in a skills-based org differ from a traditional role-based approach? I mean, I have a lot of, insights here, but John's the expert. So John, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm almost getting tired of hearing myself speak. So I'm going to fly through this because I really want to hear some of the things that Ellie has to share. But, I do have a bit of experience on this one. So I'm just going to fly through it. Okay. So I'm trying to break it down into 3. Okay. So the first is, a traditional organization is going to focus on job titles. They're going to focus on headcounts. Skills-based is not going to focus so much on headcount. They're going to focus on what is the work coming in and what are the skills that we need to attack that work. So what becomes part of their everyday vocabulary becomes, what is a critical skill? What is a critical skill being? This is, if we don't have this skill, we fail as an organization. What is a scarce skill? As in, a lot of people want this skill outside of the organization, or just not a lot of people have it. So we're going to struggle to fill in those skills internally. And how present are those skills internally? So those are 3 things that we tend to look at: criticality, scarcity, and internal presence. And that allows us to rethink our HR strategies in terms of where we build, borrow, buy, and in today's world, where we bot, BOT, as in automation and artificial intelligence. So difference between traditional and skills-based: traditional is focused on job titles and headcount. Skills-based focus on skills. Traditional has very static roles. Skills-based has dynamic deployment based on project and tasks. And finally, traditional is more based on limited internal mobility. So there's a lot more predictability actually in traditional organizations, whereas skills-based, it's more agile talent reallocation across functions based on needs.
Okay. Is there a follow-up on that? No?
I just wanted to say, I really, something you said, John, there about focus on the skills needed to tackle the job this is, or to get it done, right? And I think this is something we see a lot, not just from companies from an external experience of hiring in the right talent, but also when it comes to skills gaps analysis and understanding, okay, where do people know, where do we need to make a new onboarding or training? Maybe there's a new technology that's been brought into the business and we want to make sure that everyone's up to speed with it. Or maybe we're going to be doing a technical switch, or there's always room to grow. There's always people to learn and develop. And again, I think it's something that actually employees love. Employees don't like to be, this is it, doing the same thing, the same out. They like to be, improving and moving. And I can't remember the exact statistic, but I understand that promotion and being utilized and taking on new challenges is probably a huge motivating factor for people, especially when they're coming into the organization. They want the room to grow and the room to spread their wings. And I think focusing on specific skills, talent reallocation, projects and things like that is just a really beautiful way to allow, first of all, companies to make the most of the talent pool that they have, but also allowing the employees to showcase their skills and become really all-round incredible contributors to many different areas across the business.
Yeah, Ellie just inspired a memory of a case study that I read. So Unilever is right now a very public, they're very open about their skills-based journey. And one of the things that they've reported on that really speaks to what Ellie just shared is they built an internal talent marketplace. And yes, HR had to do quite a bit of a heavy lift in terms of mapping the skills and so on. But once all that was done, there was something that they saw that was quite, in my view, like magical, okay, is that people on their own felt mobilized to kind of like raise their hand to be able to work on projects, on business critical projects that were outside of their role, but they had the skills and the passion to do so. And so what they claim is that they've unlocked about 700,000 hours, 700,000 hours of capacity. Think, like we can't even find an hour of capacity in our week. Well, we're all overloaded on a general basis. And as an organization, they found 700,000 to focus on more than 3,000 business critical projects. This allowed them to reduce the need for new hires. It increased internal mobility. People were more excited, more engaged about the work. Productivity soared for those groups by 41%, okay, for those people that got to act based on their passion. And what they also learned, and this is a key thing for me from a hiring perspective, doesn't really help our hiring conversation today, but I'm going to say it anyways because it kind of goes counter. But what they found is that whenever they were able to move people internally, they were able to get to time of impact faster than the process of starting to put a requisition for a new hire, to sourcing that hire, to onboarding them, to getting them to time to impact. They were able to do that internally way faster than bringing in an external person. Just inspired that thought, Ellie. I just had to throw that in.
Yeah, very good thought. So that was my thought too, was that it sort of unleashes the ability for people to see what they can do. Where the old way of doing it, they didn't really know. It was sort of closed off. It was a document somewhere that were tucked away in a drawer somewhere. So there was a huge disconnect. So that was a good case study. Okay, I want to move forward. Now we're going to get into the hiring side of things. So obviously this is where things tend to go when we have something new, what's a new technology, like AI technology, or a new way of thinking of something. Usually lends itself for talent hiring and so on. So my first question here under this session is, what does good skill-based hiring look like in practice?
So I mean, look, this is skills-based hiring. This is everything that we do at Canditech. Essentially, we help companies to do this, all different types of jobs, and we do this mostly through job simulations, work sample tests. I think one of the first things we need to do is to take a step back, is to really identify what are the right skills here. And there's, for example, project management. That could be a skill, but what does that actually mean? That's kind of just a buzzword. There's lots of different things that entails. So when we start working with companies that are looking for us to help them build custom assessments, we say, okay, walk me through the day-to-day tasks and duties of someone in this role. So when you really explore, for example, a project manager, you could look at, okay, well, first of all, they need to be able to work with spreadsheets, and they need to be able to analyze data, and they be able to understand it and edit it. And maybe they also need to do some forecasting, right? To look at cohorts. But then there's also the actual management side, and they need to delegate tasks, and they need to be able to make PowerPoint presentations and communicate effectively and manage different stakeholders and communicate with the product team and the customer team and the sales team. So I think, first of all, is to move a little bit backwards from buzzwords of thinking, okay, an administrator and so on and so forth, and looking at the day-to-day tasks of what skills are actually required for the role. And that can include mapping skills, creating skills assessments, of course. Back in the day, it used to be very, very challenging to create a job simulation, right? We want to put a job simulation, a home sample task, work sample test, something that really mimics the job as much as possible, not just in one area, but in lots of different areas, different skills that are going to be coming up within the role. It used to be that you'd have to go to, the senior leader, and you'd have to ask them to, provide maybe a document or a spreadsheet and, understand, okay, what are the most difficult things that someone would need to know, or what do we need to know at someone that's coming in early on in the hiring funnel, and then they need to send that out, and the candidate would send it back, and they'd have to manually grade it. And now with AI and with tools and assessment platforms like Canditech, you can do that in one click. One click and you're on. You've got a whole library of simulations you can pick, you can customize. And so I think nowadays it's really easy and there's lots of options. And of course, what makes, for example, a great product manager at one company is going to be completely different to another product manager in another company, or take a sales expert, for example, in tech or in field sales or in retail sales or in real estate. They're all salespeople, but they have completely different skill sets and knowledge sets, and things that they need to come to the table with. So yeah, job simulations that really closely mimic not just the role, but the role within your company at this time and that team is, I think, really a good way to explain what skills-based hiring really looks like in practice.
Fantastic. Okay, so that's a good answer. I think we're going to just sort of get into some more meat here. So, what are steps that HR and TD leaders and practitioners can take today to get started on this journey?
Absolutely. I think this nicely ties into one of the earlier questions of well, first of all, it's a bit of a mind shift, a mind shift, right? A shift, but it doesn't mean that you have to do absolutely everything, flip everything. Now we're starting this whole new thing. Like, my advice would be the biggest step is to take a step and start small, and then you can scale it from there. So it could be that you diagnose sort of the different hiring processes. And of course, as with any organization, with any role, it's going to look differently between the different roles that you're hiring for. Maybe there's a particular role where many candidates are getting through the first stage and they're going to that first hiring manager interview, but the hiring manager is saying none of the candidates are relevant, they don't have the right skills. So how many, first of all, hours of the hiring manager, how many hours of their time were wasted on candidates that could have been validated earlier on, and then they wouldn't have had to have all those interviews? Or maybe candidates are passing the first interview and it gets to the director's not happy because the candidates don't have X, Y, and Z. Or maybe even candidates are getting all the way through the hiring process and they're beginning and they're starting, but they're not passing probation. So I would say that the biggest way, or step one, would be what's the lowest hanging fruit, or what's the easiest or quickest win that we can do here. Focus on a role that is particularly hard to fill, long to fill, etc., or the process just is a little bit broken, right? It's not working the way that the hiring teams or HR would expect them to work. And then start by saying, okay, well, what skills can we validate right at the top of the funnel? Can we ensure that someone can work with Excel or code, or someone can, respond appropriately to a rude customer or whatever it might be? Can we do that head on as part of the funnel and ensure that that's validated as, first step, or at least very early on in the hiring process? And then you can, take it from there step by step, roll it out. This is something we see a lot. People come with one particular use case and all of a sudden they're using this for all the different teams. So yeah, start small, but start.
So that's a very, very good point, because I think a lot of people ask me this question about, anything when it comes to, sort of starting something new, right? And you can't do it all at once. So that's why I always say to people, just start really small. So pick one role, just try something out, sort of like a test pilot, right? Because if you do it that way, then it's easier to kind of wrap your head around it, try it. If you fail at it, great, learn from it, to move on. And then if it works out great, then you've got something really tangible that you can take to, back to the business. So I think that's a really important thing. Don't be scared about having to sort of overhaul everything. Just start small. Okay. I just want to, so this is obviously a really good thing, because I'm a huge believer in, learning from your failures. I failed many times in life. So I both personally professionally, I'm not going to talk about what they are, but anyway, what are the key mistakes that organizations may make, when actually adopting this new approach?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, starting small, understanding it, it's always a bit of trial and error. It can be a big change to jump in, but it's something that people understand very, very quickly. I think, again, it comes back to mapping out the right skills, making sure that we're actually evaluating the right skills. For example, let's say you're hiring for a customer support manager, and you think that one of the skills is being able to write in English, but actually when you speak to someone in the team, they say, well, everyone uses ChatGPT, right? So maybe the skill is actually on how someone can work with ChatGPT rather than how well they know English, right? Again, looking at the day-to-day practicalities, how are people that are performing really well in this role? What is their day-to-day? What does their diary look like? What do they do? Who are they speaking to? How are they managing all the different processes? For example, they're like an administrator role, typing speed test. well, why would it be important for me to know, for someone to know how quickly I can type random words like orange and book and bottle? But instead, maybe the thing that we're trying to evaluate is accuracy, or someone's attention to detail, or someone's ability to work with numbers and spreadsheets and input information accurately, rather than just like being able to move my fingers at a certain pace. I think another common mistake is that people focus just on the hard skills. Maybe they're hiring for a developer and they need someone that can work with data and SQL. What about their soft skills, right? What about the way that they can communicate, or they can solve problems, or they can explain how they got to their answer because there's someone new that's going to be coming onto the team and they need to be able to train them? Or on the other side, maybe I'm looking for, a salesperson, and maybe I'm only looking for soft skills, video interviews, case studies. As someone who works in tech sales, I can say that I have to be pretty tech savvy as well. Picked up a lot along the years. Again, looking at everything holistically and saying, okay, what are the hard skills, but also what are the soft skills, and maybe what are the cognitive abilities, and what kind of culture fit, etc. And looking at everything on a again in a holistic way. I would say then some more other practical, not mistakes, I would say, but I guess misconception is that, well, the candidate, we don't want to put too much pressure on the candidate, so let's give them unlimited time. But then you have, if you send out a test to 2 candidates and it takes Mary an hour to do, but it takes Stephen 3 hours to do, but they get the same score, you're not comparing apples to apples. And generally in jobs, people are expected to do tasks within a certain time frame. Have a standardized test, not having an unlimited time, but having a structured time that you feel would be appropriate for someone to be able to do those tasks. And also, I think a common mistake is that people are a little bit scared that, they're going to put off the right candidate. They just don't want to sit and do 45 minutes or an hour-long test. And first of all, I can tell you that's definitely wrong. The right candidates will definitely want to do that. And if you have a candidate that maybe doesn't want to do a 45-minute test, you have to, I guess, ask yourself, is that the right candidate that wants to come into this organization? Because as well as getting, the skills and the scores, we're also looking at motivation, right? And someone that doesn't want to do a test probably doesn't have that motivation to join the company, or if they do join the company, maybe not stay that long. So it's, again, looking at a lot of different factors and not being scared to put off the wrong people, if that makes sense.
It's the eagerness test, how eager somebody is.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think there is a balance too, obviously. I mean, if you're going to put people through 42 hours of testing, obviously that's not going to go over well. But I think those are just excellent points.
If I just want to add on that, this is exactly why adding a time limit for a test is absolutely critical, because if you just say to the candidate, here's the test, just get it done when you can. Well, candidates don't know how long are they supposed to be working on that for an hour, for a week, for 2 weeks? Well, did other people work on it? And so now this task, they have no benchmark as to how long it should take them to do this test. Whereas here's the test, it's 45 minutes or an hour or however long it is. Well, now they know how long they should be investing in this test, rather than it being like a bit of a blank or a bit of a gray space where they don't know if they've done enough, right? And so yes, but also I think there's a huge argument for being able to give a time test and giving the candidate that structure that, okay, this is how long it should take me to do it.
Yeah, I think the moral of the story here is that we need to start challenging what, a lot of us are, but challenging how we've been doing things for all this time, and try different approaches, really, right? So that's what it's all about, really. Okay, let's move on to the next section here, which is all about technology, which is sort of my favorite section. Not to minimize the last 45 minutes of this, but this is really important because I've always been a huge advocate that to scale HR operations, you need to have, the right tech. So here we go. Here's question 1. What technology is needed to maximize our success in the skills-based or AI question marks? So, I threw that in there, and I'm going to put a little bit of a plug in here. So, aside from using Canditech as their go-to platform, sorry guys, but general question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a few things that come to my mind as kind of like no-brainers, and then I'm going to go into some more unique stuff. And so, using a recruitment platform today, AI enabled, in whatever way, shape, or form that looks like, is kind of a no-brainer. People are our lifeblood. Making sure that we have the right people at the right time with the least amount of burden and overhead for the business to go out and get them. I think it's a win-win-win all around for everybody involved. The second, which I think is really important, and skills-based organizations don't really work without this, is some kind of internal skills marketplace. Something that's very powerful at understanding not just the skills that you have internally, but the context of those skills, as well as understanding the skills that exist out in the market, the scarcity of those skills, and where those skills are geographically located, because there's applications today that easily do that. as well as the value, the financial value of those skills, that all exists already. It's out there. And so being able to access that information really helps fuel the build, borrow, buy, bot strategies. And I would say the third, which is really emerging today, and every time I show this in my workshops and presentations, I have to lift everybody's jaws off the floor, is using, when you think, before I say this, but when you think about skills-based organization, a key central theme that I named earlier is people's ability to learn. It creates a learning organization and a learning culture. And you need to have the tools that are going to do more than just, hey, you need to learn this skill, go look at this video. Like that's existed for 5 years already. Like we need something more robust, and that day is here. Everybody has access to Google. You can go onto Google AI Studio. You can share screen on your Google AI Studio, and AI will watch whatever you're doing and teach you, comment, answer questions live based on whatever you are doing. So a demo that I often do is I show a really complex spreadsheet with a ton of information that I don't even understand, but I ask AI to help me understand what that is and help me understand how to use it. And so there's platforms today, for example, for those that have sales teams on the call, where you have the AI on your side of a virtual call that is going to analyze what you're doing while you're on the call with the client. It's going to tell you to talk slower because you're talking too quickly. It's going to tell you to look at the camera more. It's going to suggest that you ask more questions instead of just making statements. But then it's going to take it a step further. It's going to say, well, the client just said this, sell this feature, or the client just gave you this objection. This is a good rebuttal. So whenever we talk about skills-based organizations really leveraging technology, what we're also talking about is bringing technology into they say kind of bringing learning in the flow of work. So you bring technology in the flow of work to bring learning to the learner in the moment that they need it. Those to me are like three main areas of AI technology that would really help from a skills-based organizational perspective.
I want to, of course, you couldn't talk about skills assessments without talking about AI for lots of different things. For instance, like we're using AI to track anomalies for cheating prevention tools. We're using AI to help build customer simulations for any position, even if you're not the subject matter. So you can have a recruiter that doesn't have a technical background that in one click of a button, now they can build a job simulation for a Python developer. But it's also using AI as part of the evaluation process itself. Most candidates now, when they start a job, they're going to have access to the internet, right? And more, especially in the tech world, a lot of hiring managers are saying, well, actually, it's just important for someone to be able to work with AI as it is for the raw skill itself. I know that in Canditech, we're hiring for a prompt manager who their main job is going to be around prompting AI. So what do? We came up with a solution. For instance, the platform, we have embedded ChatGPT and embedded Google. It means that you can allow candidates to use ChatGPT and Google in the assessment as they would do, again, simulating the role, but now you can see how they're using it. They can see what prompts, they can make sure that they are using it in a way to help them really succeed within the role and not just copying in the question and saying, answer this for me. So yeah, it's there's a lot of AI around everything. And I think AI can really, it's a real blessing for the workplace. Personally, I use ChatGPT professionally, but also personally, it helps me with a huge myriad of things. But I think certainly in terms of like skills and really getting into the realistic job simulations, again, it can be a really, really great tool.
So I guess the moral of the story is that the robot have landed. They've actually arrived. It's a good thing. You don't like robots. Anyway, so moving on to the next question. We're almost done here. So I just wanted to just ask you a bit about the future. This might be a really sort of tough one to answer. How do you see this approach changing, evolving, over the next couple of years?
I'll take a quick crack at that. And I just want to build on what Ellie just shared. You talked about like allowing people in the interview process to use ChatGPT. And I think it's so powerful, that one statement. I don't think people realize why or to what extent. Right now, the stats show that 40% of organizations, at least in North America, are using AI. 70% of employees are using AI. 40% companies are using it, yet 70% of employees are using it. And half of those 70% of employees are afraid to admit it, that they're using AI at work for many reasons, but they don't feel like they're allowed to, and they fear it. Fear the business knowing that they're using it for a variety of reasons. And so I think a big shift is just culturally for leaders and businesses to make it safe for employees to be using AI and to talk about that they're using AI. I think we need to see AI today, whether we're talking about skills-based or anything else, as the equivalence of word processing when the typewriter came out. You wouldn't hire somebody 10 years after that that's still just committed to using a typewriter and not using word processing. It just becomes part of everyday skill. Same thing as AI. And the last thing I'll just say on this point is linked to skills is people want to be able to leave with their skills. And what does that mean? There is a greater push these days, and Deloitte even reports back on this. People want a skill passport. People want to be able to walk out of their business saying, these are the skills that are validated, that are actually mine. And so rather than just filling out a job application or a job description, that they actually have a passport that says, these are validated skills that I have, would they work in your business? And so this is coming. This is an evolution that we're going to be seeing.
Thank you. Ellie, do you want to add to that?
Just a couple of things on that. I just want to add, I think this question, where do you see it evolving in the next 3 to 5 years? Where do you see it evolving next year? It's absolutely insane the impact that AI has had in businesses in the last, I think 6 months, or maybe even a year now, I don't know, since it was launched, and now it's being part of lots of products and efficiency. I honestly can't even I can't even foresee where it's going to be in 3 to 5 years. I also think that in the next 3 to 5 years, the resume is going to become completely kind of irrelevant. We're already seeing it become irrelevant. We're already seeing LinkedIn applies, right? And yes, because LinkedIn actually has your skills validated with the skills that you did in every role. So I really think that we're going to see the death of the CV and the death of the resume, and putting more emphasis on who is this human? What are the robust set of skills that they have that might not just be great for my marketing manager, but could also help me and be utilized in lots of different areas. And I think that's going to lead to more functioning organizations, happier employees, and hopefully people that are staying more long term also in organizations, because they're getting that satisfaction that they're being needed, and they're able to, like I said, spread their wings, or the T, Jonathan, that you mentioned at the start. So yeah, it'll be exciting.
Fantastic. Maybe just very quickly, because there are 2 questions here in the Q&A. So do you want to get to those questions now, or do you want to answer this question?
I think we should answer people's questions. We have 2 minutes.
Okay, let's do that. All right. So the first question here is excellent. It's from Sam. Thank you. So how do I easily create tools that enables hiring manager to hire based on skill? I am a big fan of the STAR method, AWS here, but training the hiring managers and then enabling them is the real challenge. So excellent question.
I can give it to Ellie because I think it links closely to how you have your conversations with your clients to boil it down to the skills. So you gave me a really good example in our prep about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So just for clarity, I can't actually see the question. How do you manage the change management? Is that?
Yeah. How do I usually create tools that enable hiring managers, to hire based on skills, and then. But training the hiring managers and then enabling them is the real challenge. So Sam asked this question earlier on, so we already talked a lot about it, about this. But do you want to give, to really a concise answer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a whole myriad of tools now. Not to sell Canditech, but Canditech, all our users, they have the full ability to come on, browse the library. They have the AI builder. They can just put in the URL, the JD, and I think empowering hiring managers to be able to create their own simulations and again look at the different skills that they have in the jobs that they have is something that you're putting the ownership on them to create simulations. And I feel like it's something that always we hear a reservation from the HR is the HR want to adopt this, but they're worried that the hiring managers, they're not going to take onto it, and there's going to be a lot of change management. And always it's the case that the hiring managers, once they get in and start exploring the platform, they're always the biggest advocates of Canditech. They come to their next company and the first thing they do is book a call and they want to implement it theirs. I think by passing actually allowing hiring managers the opportunity to come on and create things for themselves and taking ownership of that is a really great place to start. And again, just understanding from the people that are working in the day-to-day jobs, okay, what are actually the most challenging parts of the jobs, including those early on, and that should really help to make things make everyone feel empowered and happy about the process, and also create a great hiring flow.
Okay, thank you for that. We just want to get to one more question here from Justin. It's out of time, but sort of bear with us here. Justin's question is, how do you ensure a fair and equitable compensation structure in a skills-based org structure? I would assume there is a structured approach based on number and and level of skill. So that's a question, and I get asked a lot too. So I don't know if
Yeah.
you want to take that on, John.
Yeah, that's a big question, and it's multifaceted. I'll do my best to be hyper concise on this. First, this notion of paying for skills is actually very old. Like if you look at how unions were paying for skills in the 70s, 80s, 90s, the model actually already exists, and you can just copy paste it from unions a little bit. What we're seeing today, for example, there's a very large, I guess I can name it because they talk about it on their website, RBC, Royal Bank of Canada, is all about skills-based practices. It's front and center on their career pages on their websites. And what they do, they're piloting this right now with a pilot of 10,000 people. Okay, that's a big pilot, but 10,000 people. And so what they're doing is they reward people for new skills that they develop with a one-time bonus for every new critical skill that is being developed. So it is a way of helping people, reward them for the effort that they're making without having to, in my opinion, this isn't their words, my opinion, without putting finances back against the wall by having to commit to an exponentially increasing salary base as people tack on new skills. So you get one-time bonus every year for every new critical skill. And the next question that comes up from that normally is, well, how do we know that they developed that skill? How do we evaluate it? And this, I think, links so nicely with the job simulations, because the debate out there today between having a skills taxonomy versus a task taxonomy kind of gets resolved to me by this notion of how do we know that the person has a skill? If somebody identifies that they have the skill, you have to do all this evaluation to see if they have it. But if you look at the task that they did they accomplish the task? That's a certain level of skill. Did they accomplish it in one try? That's another level of skill. Were they able to, take it to a whole? So instead of just looking and evaluating people's skills, you can just observe what is the work that they did. And if they did that work, that means they have those competencies. And then what is that competency worth to us? And we give them a bonus for having achieved that level of competency. So that's trying to take a very complex question and trying to answer it in 2-3 small parts. I hope I did it justice.
I think that's fantastic, John. And so, so we are out of time. So I want to thank everybody for being here. But we also want to give you a chance to try this out with Canditech. And so if you want to scan the QR code, I will send the actual link, also tomorrow in the recap email. But please give it a go. So send Talia Finn an email at talia@canditech.org, scan the QR code. And then finally, I just want to thank both Ellie and John for being here. I thought it was fantastic. We have a lot of nuggets. I took a whole page of notes already. And so we'll be sharing the video tomorrow with the action rating. And then I'm also going to be writing almost like an article about this as well. So this topic too. Please check out Canditech.com. My website it's going to be overhauled. So this time next month, it's going to be a brand new website. So I just want to thank everybody for being here. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you.